What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and today I have a very weird video because I don't normally do these kind of things. But for those of you who don't know, which is probably a decent amount of you, I am a My Hero Academia fan. I have recently been watching the anime, and it's one of my favorite anime of all time at the moment. But I'm going to be talking about how I imagine a My Hero Academia game could work. Now, let me just say first off, yes, I do know that there are My Hero games. There's one for mobile devices, and then there's also a 3DS one, but there's three reasons why I'm making this. One, I don't really care about mobile games to begin with. Two, I heard that the 3DS game isn't all that great to begin with, so yeah. And then there's also not a console game. But regardless of all that, because you guys probably don't even care about the reason all too much, you're just here to see how I would imagine a My Hero Academia game could work. One idea that I have is that it would kind of work out in the way of a Dynasty Warriors game, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that, you might be familiar with Hyrule Warriors or a recently upcoming title that's somewhat based off of Dynasty Warriors called Fire Emblem Warriors. And how that game works is that you would go around fighting a bunch of huge groups of basically just like generic mobs and junk like that. Depending on the franchise it's usually a group of enemies from that particular series. So for My Hero Academia, it would be like very low level villains, just basic thugs, stuff like that. And you have all these big areas that you can run around in. For example, you could have like the city, possibly the schoolyard itself. And there's a bunch of different areas that could probably just be made up for the sake of this kind of game. Now, one special thing that the Dynasty Warriors franchise has is that you can do a bunch of different objectives at the same time. For one thing, you could go around rescuing different people from different areas, and then you could take out some low-level thugs, and then there's also like mini-bosses or regular bosses, which is usually how the levels work out. And then you could also run around for special items or stuff like that, but the objectives are always changing all the time, so it's frequent action like whenever possible. And one of the major reasons why I also feel like a Dynasty Warriors playstyle could work out very well is because Dynasty Warriors is over the top whenever it comes to its combat. Whether it's the original Dynasty Warriors itself, Hyrule Warriors, or Fire Emblem Warriors, you can attack just a big group of people at the same time, and they have all sorts of flashy attacks and moves and combos that you can do. And with My Hero having people that are basically superheroes who have powers that can be specifically used as flashy moves, it would be a perfect fit to have something where you can just fight giant mobs of people and just mow them down. And people's quirks that would be really cool to see would be like Bakugo with his explosions, Todoroki with his fire and ice, that's already filled with potential. And since everything's blown out of proportion, characters like Kirishima or Asui, who would seem to not really have too much, could have their abilities fully fleshed out if you think about it well enough. And another bonus that would come with the Dynasty Warriors playstyle is the fact that there's a bunch of playable characters. Hyrule Warrior has about 30 characters alone. So easily you already have Class A, which I believe is 16 people. And then you can have the instructors, and then you could also play as villains too. Now, there is a few problems with this. For one thing, there are some characters that won't exactly be able to be represented very well. For example, Shinzo, he wouldn't exactly work out very well because his quirk is brainwashing. So I can hardly find it really working since most of his attacks would be just normal attacks, so you might as well just have a regular person. And it also doesn't help with how his quirk works, because in order for it to be activated, he has to ask you a question and then you have to respond to it. So yeah, not all characters would be able to be represented, but most of the characters that you would normally see are still going to be represented in a fair way. Now, another possible con, this is kind of in the middle, is that it wouldn't be able to take place of the same episodes as the anime or anything in the manga, because usually what happens in the manga is that at least most of it is centered around Izuku. However, with Dynasty Warriors, it takes place from kind of everyone's perspective, really. Or at least more than just one singular person. But since the story mainly focuses on one person, it doesn't exactly work out well. And then a lot of the time it ends up being one-on-one fights, 2-on-2, 3, or whatever. There's not really many times where there's giant groups of enemies, so there would have to be an original plot line. And then it would also have to be non-canon, of course. Now, a possible idea I have is that let's pretend that Basically everything takes place in a separate alternate universe where all the students have already graduated and all that junk, and now they're officially like heroes or whatever. And so now they're working together to just go out and defeat whatever villains, and a new possible villain organization or league of villains, quote unquote, could show up out of nowhere, and you'd have to also deal with them while having to, you know, rescue the city and just fighting off whatever threats occur. Pretty basic story, but if any of you guys have any ideas on that, you could try and elaborate on that in the comments below. Now, in terms of game modes, what I would imagine is that you obviously have the story mode like I mentioned before, and then you have free roam where you're able to just go around as whatever character you want and you could just practice combos or just survey the map. You have survival mode where you just survive as long as you can, and then challenge mode where I guess it could be like story missions, but then you also have special requirements that are like short little missions with particular things you have to do, and they can be pretty difficult. And also the possibility of this isn't exactly too far-fetched because One Piece also has a Dynasty Warriors game, so it could happen. But that's pretty much it for that one video game idea. But the other one that I have, and it's the one that a lot more people are thinking about, is a 2D fighter, and in my opinion I feel like it would work kind of like Marvel vs. Capcom, where you could have one main character out in the field and then you can have 2 assists and you guys can swap in and out whenever you guys can. Or it can be like a 3D fighter like Naruto Ninja Storm, which kind of has the same rules applied to it. And I'm gonna bring this up because I brought this up with the other video game idea, is that fighting games usually have decently sized roster. So again, with the big cast of characters in My Hero, perfect roster already filled out. And this also helps with the special case of Shinzo, since it doesn't really have to be too blown out of proportion for the attacks, so other special cases like him would be able to have their time to shine. Now, this would actually be able to go over the actual canon storyline because, like I said before, with the Dynasty Warriors playstyle, it wouldn't really support 1v1 fights or 2v2, but of course, since it's like a traditional fighter, it would easily be able to do that. Now, of course, like I said before, there are also multiple characters that it's kind of taking the spot of, so I do possibly feel like it could take the style of Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3, where it had its own story mode, but you could also play as multiple characters and play through all their story arcs or whatever. And in terms of game modes, of course, story mode, again, like I said before, and then there's the exhibition mode where you have 1v1, 2v2, or 3v3. And then I do also feel like it could do something that Skullgirls did, where it has 1v1 or 1v2 or whatever combination you want. And then there's also a challenge mode, which again, it's just fighting certain characters but with certain conditions, like you have half health or something like that, or your hyper bar or whatever it would be in the case of this game regenerates very slowly. And then it also has the advantage of online play, so. But like, imagine if Arc System Works was to work on a My Hero game. That would be amazing, especially considering how well they're doing with Dragon Ball FighterZ. So if they could do My Hero, that would be a dream come true for me. But it's just a matter of time until someone tries to do a My Hero game for a console. But that's all the ideas I had for a My Hero game. If you guys have any ideas or you guys want to comment on anything that I explained in the video, let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe, and maybe I'll do more of these kinds of videos. But until next video, take care.